Israel and Hamas are conducting indirect peace talks in Egypt. It's seen as the best chance yet to end the two-year war. Helping to hammer things out will be a U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Hamas delegates are asking for high-profile prisoners to be among those released by Israel after it releases living hostages being held in Gaza. For its part, Israel has agreed to withdraw to a certain line on the map inside the Gaza Strip as part of the deal with Hamas to release those remaining hostages. Joining us live tonight to talk about all of this is NBC News military analyst, retired four-star Army General Barry McCaffrey. Thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be with you, Joyce.
So these peace talks are underway with delegates discussing President Trump's ceasefire plan. Explain for us what is likely happening right now and whether you're optimistic.
Well, I think in the short run, it's very encouraging. President Trump personally got engaged, threatening Netanyahu in a very direct way to stop the bombing and the artillery strikes inside Gaza, and he was publicly threatened with obliteration Hamas. So I think the threats have played a role. Gaza is 85% destroyed. The humanitarian crisis is real and growing, maybe as many as 60,000 killed. I think what is likely to happen, we hope, is Hamas will release the hostages, certainly the living hostages, and that will put pressure on the Israelis to stop the continuing offensive. The follow-on phase of this, in which Hamas disarms, the leaders leave the Gaza Strip, they have no further involvement in governance of Gaza. Hard to imagine that happening, but we'll have to get through phase one to see how it turns out.
That would be a miracle if we can get through phase one, honestly. Let's talk about the devastation on the ground in Gaza. It's almost impossible to describe. So much of it has been decimated. Tens of thousands dead. Israel has continued the relentless bombing of the enclave. More than 100 people have been killed there since Friday. So what do you think? Is the Prime Minister Netanyahu ignoring the president's demand to stop the bombing?
Well, I think, again, Netanyahu has to get the hostages back for his own political good. Part of that is applying direct threats to Hamas, who does not want to lose control of Gaza Strip. Look, this is a tragedy of immense proportion. There's no question about it. You've got 2 million Palestinians in a very constrained place, where 30,000 Hamas fighters who committed an outrage 2 years ago on 7 October are fighting from underground, normally co-located with targets that they think the Israelis won't strike, mosques, schools, UN feeding areas. So it's been a bitter conflict, and we need to bring it to a halt, obviously, and start some kind of remedial humanitarian operations in the coming weeks.
As you know, the UN has declared famine there. I read one report today, only about 5% of the population in Gaza has even access to clean water. Some human rights advocates have accused Israel of using food and water as weapons of war and tools of genocide. Is that what's happening there?
I wouldn't term it that way. I think basically Hamas has been trying to control the delivery of food and services, and the Israelis and the U.S. contractors set up an alternative way to handle it. Hamas has put the brakes on a lot of this effort to provide food, and medical care, and water. What we need to hope is that the hostages come back, and that will end the Israelis' real political viability to continue the bombardment. I think that will be the turning point. But in the short run, Hamas is trying to control the population and remain in power.
In a couple of words, how would you describe the situation on the ground for the people of Gaza?
Absolute misery. They've been relocated in and out of populated areas. A great number of them right now are living in tents or out in the open. There is problematic delivery of food. There's almost no medical care. So it's a humanitarian disaster of the first order. And the only way out of it is because the Israelis will never deal with Hamas as a controlling authority in Gaza again. Not going to happen. There'll be no two-state solution for 100 years. What we can hope is that the fighting stops and humanitarian assistance in massive amounts goes into Gaza.
And finally, best case scenario, how do you expect this will play out in the next couple of weeks?
Well, again, we can only hope that the fighting stops. You know, at the end of the day, nobody surrenders through diplomatic negotiation something that they have already won on the battlefield. Hamas is at wit's end. The population wants desperately for the war to stop. One can only hope that that's what happens in the coming 2 weeks. By the way, I think the Trump administration played this pretty well. And if they pull it off, the second phase may never happen. But to stop the fighting ought to be the primary objective in the coming weeks.
And to get the return of the hostages.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. General Barry McCaffrey, we always appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Good to be with you, Joyce.